Yesterday morning, a letter in a gavel shook Washington. Picture a bawdy birthday note allegedly from Trump. Compliant, more Congress handing in power. Stay with us to unpack what all this means for democracy, for accountability, and for you as we try to find the middle ground. Hey, everybody, you want more bold middle ground takes? Tap the support button if you're using Buzzsprout, or check us out on Buzzsprout. It's to the right of your page. Donate, subscribe, help us with, put out some great content and get into the top 10. Hit up our PayPal donate. We depend on this stuff to keep going, and we appreciate all of you. Welcome back to the Middle Ground, Mike, where we step between the lines and unpack the messy truth. We're gonna talk about some documents that resurfaced from 2003, from Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. Apparently, that should drop. And Congress is edging closer than ever to rubber stamping presidential power. And before we get into that, don't forget to show the podcast some love if you like it. Give us some support. Help us, take care of these things. We did get some good news. We're ranking number 36 in the United States for news commentary. And somehow, thank you, France, we are number 44 in France. Would have never guessed that. So thank you, everybody. We're going to be having a giveaway coming up pretty soon. So where if you like, share, show some proof in the comments section, send us a text through Buzzsprout, go on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, let us know that you shared this, the Facebook, whatever, at least 10 times or gotten 10 people to share it. Put it on there. We're giving 5 middle ground mic tumblers a week away. Check them out right here. So if you want to be entered into that, go for it. We also got some great episodes coming up this week with Zafra and one with Damien. Zafra's a scientist that she's done some great work. Damien's got some great stuff on politics and, meshing things together and, a new political approach. Great guy. You're going to love the episode. Don't forget, next week, 2 weeks from now, and so July 30th, we will be dropping the interview with ex-CIA counterterrorism analyst Brent. And that is going to be a crazy bombshell of an interview. So I encourage everybody to check it out. If you would like to buy some merchandise, whether you want to buy a tumbler, don't want to wait, let me know. Shoot something in the comment section. I'll message you. We also got some hats. We can get you coffee mugs, whatever you want. All right, let's dive into it. So the Epstein letter has been unveiled according to the Wall Street Journal. It's part of a 50th birthday album put together by Ghislaine Maxwell. I can never say her name right. Apparently, it's been signed by Trump, containing a nude sketch and lines. We have certain things in common, Jeffrey. AP News, Wall Street Journal all confirm this. Trump's reactions, he obviously denies it. I mean, who would admit something like that, right? Calling it fake. And he's filed a $10 billion defamation suit once again against someone, against the Journal, and coincidentally, Murdoch, Fox News, all those, folks. This is really splitting his base. So people are blaming Democrats, others uneasy. 75% of Americans in a recent poll have disapprove of Trump's handling of Epstein, and 89% want all files released. Mr. President, MAGA, everybody, just release it. Let the chips fall where they may. The American public says that's what they want. So that's what we need to do. Is the lawsuit a pressuring tactic, or is it a real stand for the truth? What's going to happen? We don't know. We do know that there is more Jeffrey Epstein stuff than the president and the attorney general initially wanted to let us on. You remember Kash Patel and Dan Bongino almost left their positions over it. Then guys like Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, all those guys really put the pressure on MAGA and the president to really boom. And, they made some progress. Even though Trump's upset about it, they did make a lot of progress. So we did do some good there. Let's kind of turn over to Congress a little bit. Mike Johnson gave Trump gavel after he signed, the big, beautiful bill. It's symbolic of Congress kind of bowing down to the president. It's not a good look. I guess you could kind of say, symbolic, yes, but the experts are saying, the analysts are warning of this trend. A lot of things have been blessed by the Supreme Court with the cuts and things like that to a lot of the federal agencies. I get why that makes a lot of people nervous, but we can't let that control us. That doesn't really help anybody, make progress forward. What does a compliant Congress actually mean? Where's the line between legislation and lockdown go? Congress has to stand up to the executive branch and the judicial branch to a degree, but they also have to make sure what they do works. So let's not forget that, and this is why it matters. The balance of power between the branches is critical. If Congress bows down, who keeps the executive in check? Does the vice president just become doing whatever they want? Hey, everybody, you want more bold middle ground takes? Tap the support button if you're using Buzzsprout, or check us out on Buzzsprout. It's to the right of your page. Donate, subscribe, help us with, put out some great content and get into the top 10. Hit up our PayPal donate. We depend on this stuff to keep going, and we appreciate all of you. Yeah, all right, everybody, let's keep going. We talked about the vice president and him kind of, doing what he wants, and, making so that the president can, what's the purpose of vice president. But, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about why it matters, right? The balance of power, the checks and balances is something that's key, and we really got to get back to that, making sure Congress does its job. Like, Congress needs to do its part, right? Congress needs to step in. The Supreme Court has said that about a lot of issues, right? Whether it comes to abortion, things of that nature, that Congress needs to make the laws. It's Congress's job to make sure that abortion isn't only up to the Supreme Court. So if that's something, things like that are something you believe in, go after your local legislature, talk in your local groups, whatever it is you do to push that, So let's talk a little bit about kind of some middle ground stuff, right? On Epstein, let's keep fighting for the documents. Let's get that grand jury testimony out there. Supposedly there's some money thing that was flying around. I don't know a whole lot about that, but let's get that out there too. I'm going to do another podcast that I'll drop on, instead of Quick Hit News Thursday this week. I'm going to do a podcast we're going to explore the Tulsi Gabbard and Obama Russia thing. I really want to see where that goes, because I would hope that it wasn't the way that it sounds it might be, but you never know, right? So we're going to kind of go based on that. Again, the legislators, they need to flex their constitutional muscles. They need to introduce reform bills that both sides can get behind to some degree. Congress needs to reassert its power on trade, emergency declarations, and the agencies, even lawsuits filed if needed. And this comes from lots of sites think this. Like the Daily Beast thinks this. Harvard thinks this. A lot of just all sides of the aisle kind of think this way. And I think that we need to, kind of get back to that. In the next few weeks, let's watch for some legal filings, the grand jury disclosures, congressional hearings, and each question isn't just about what happened, it's about who is getting to decide about what's next, because that's the middle ground. And let's keep pushing that. Also, we got some new episodes coming up soon. We got the tumbler giveaway coming up, like I said at the beginning of the episode. Don't forget to check below. Support us, donate to PayPal, donate to the show, help us get some advertisements going. That stuff is great, and it's going to really help us push this envelope further. Like I said, for the last 30 days, we've been ranked number 36. Let's get into the top 10. Let's make the middle ground mic the standard for where people get civil discussion. Hope this catches everybody doing well. We'll see y'all on podcast that gets released this week. And then I will personally see all of you on Thursday as we talk about the Tulsi Gabbard documents she dropped. And we'll go from there. Have a good one, everybody.